and I am so grateful that we're able to do this. I'm so excited to hear what you have to share about the School of Heat, especially now that we're in the summer, and inflammation and climate change and all that good stuff, which is what you're going to be talking about at the FSOMA conference as well, correct?
Correct.
So why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself to our community here in Florida?
Sure. My name is Brendan Kelly. I'm an acupuncturist and Western and Chinese herbalist, and I'm speaking to you from our clinic in Burlington, Vermont, northwest corner of Vermont. And in addition to practicing Chinese medicine, natural medicine, I also have been involved with environmental issues, specifically climate change, for 25 years, longer actually, almost 30 years. And so what I want to talk about now and to talk about in the class at the conference is the intimate connection between what's happening within us and what's happening ecologically. Because Chinese medicine really is uniquely situated to understand those connections. As I read the history of Chinese medicine since its inception, it has been a holistic medicine. It's understood that what happens within us is reflected in the world around us. And one translation of the Neijing, the first chapter of the Neijing, says that all of the influences in the universe are within us. So that's not saying all the influences in nature. That's saying all the influences in the universe within us. And by extension, we are small universes unto ourselves. So I think the wisdom, part of the wisdom that Chinese medicine can share with us is to understand the specific patterns, the specific connection between what's happening within us, what's happening in the culture around us, and what's happening on the larger scale of the environment, the climate in particular.
Wow, wonderful. So how long have you been in practice now?
I've been practicing full-time for 15 years. And before getting into Chinese medicine, I was also a Western herbalist. So I had a small Western clinic for several years before getting into Chinese medicine.
Well, that's amazing. And so once you went into acupuncture school and started practicing, I am assuming you were able to see the beautiful synergies and be able to blend both worlds, correct?
Absolutely. And Chinese medicine has been blending things for thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
And it's if you look at the history of the medical development of Chinese medicine, that blending happens continuously. And I think Chinese medicine is inherently holistic, so it lends itself to blending larger social and ecological issues. And I think that the Wenbing, the School of Heat, is a particularly relevant and important perspective, important medical view at this time, because as I see it clearly, the planet is warming and our culture is hot and overstimulated. And so many of the issues that we see, at least clinically, are based on the same diagnosis, which is heat.
So tell us a little bit about the School of Heat. Is there more than one different type of school? Where did it originate from?
Yeah, it's so different people will give you different perspectives on that. I'll give you my opinion. My perspective is, as is almost always true in Chinese medicine, there's a diversity of opinions, which is a strength, genuine strength.
Yes.
So as I see it, the School of Heat was really developed starting in the 1300s in China. And the impetus for creating the School of Heat, again, in my translation, my understanding, is the inability of the Shanhanmen, the School of Cold, to treat epidemics. Several million people died in what in Europe would have been the Middle Ages in China. And that was based on epidemics. It was based on what could have been a similar issue to the bubonic plague in Europe. And so the usual Shanhanmen perspective in particular was not thought to be particularly effective. And my understanding of that medically and historically is Shanhanmen is obviously the school of cold damage. Well, epidemics are not a cold condition. Epidemics are a hot condition. Anything that moves to a population quickly implies that it has excess yang, and excess yang is heat. So the school of heat, while there had been discussion of heat-induced disorders, I think the coalescing into the school of heat, into the Wenbing, was really precipitated by the inability of the Shanhanlun to treat epidemics in China starting in the 1300s. By the 1500s, it had really been developed, and then by the 1700s, I think it was in a form that was written about more. So I think the Chinese medicine historically has developed based on change, as cultural change, ecological change, societal change. And so if you look at the Wenbing clearly comes from the Shanhanlun. It's similar ideas, generally similar disease progression theory, but it's saying that rather than all disease coming from cold, it's saying that all disease is coming from heat. Now, I think we can not be wedded to one in particular. We can say there can be cold disease and heat disease.
Right.
And in my opinion, as I become more and more of a Wenbing practitioner, I incorporate lots of other perspectives as well. I was first trained in the 5 elements, the Wu Jing, which is still a major view that we and I incorporate here at our clinic. But I really see the underlying issue of our times, medically, culturally, ecologically, as one of heat. And then the assumption, of course, yin-yang theory, if one part of yin-yang goes up, the other one goes down. So with the heat rises, then the yin goes down. So that can both be true heat, yang excess. It can also be false heat, yin deficient heat. So I look for heat with almost everyone that I treat, and I find heat, and I find that treating heat can really be incredibly effective physically, mentally, and emotionally.
So in your practice, do you primarily treat anxiety and inflammation? Or what patterns have you seen mostly with your practice in Vermont?
A lot of heat. We treat a wide range of issues. We certainly treat heat. We treat anxiety, which would obviously be kind of mental and emotional heat. Physical heat would be inflammation. But I use the Wenbing perspective to treat most things. I treat most dermatological issues based on heat. A major part, I taught a class 2 years ago at the conference on treating Lyme disease. There's a disease progression theory that starts with heat that describes the progression of Lyme. So I use heat-based theory to treat Lyme disease. I use heat-based theory to treat most psycho-emotional conditions. I use heat-based Wenbing theory to treat cancer and the underlying causes of cancer. So I really use it. We have a very diverse practice. We treat many, many different conditions, physical, mental, and emotional. And I think a link between all of those really is heat. Heat is what we have. Our cultural diagnosis is heat. We're overstimulated, we're too busy, we're stressed out, we don't get enough rest, we're not content. We have yang excess and yin deficiency on a cultural scale, and that's affecting us on a personal scale also.
Wow, amazing. And how do you see this in regards to climate change as well? You touched about it a little bit before, but if you can go more into detail with that.
Sure, it's the same thing. Microcosm, macrocosm, little picture, big picture, right? We are a universe unto ourselves. So Chinese medicine can enable us, encourage us to see this pattern on the micro scale of our own lives, of the patients that we work with, as well as the macro scale of what's happening with climate. Well, Wenbing, basic principle, heat goes up, yin goes down, yin deficient. Well, that's also a very accurate way to describe climate change. I wrote a book several years ago about climate change using Chinese medicine lens to describe it. And it's the same dynamic. We have over 30 years of conclusive climatological data, climatological information that indicates that the planet is warming. So that's hot, clearly. But in the last 12 to 15 years, climate science is also describing how the ability of the planet to sequester greenhouse gases, the ability of the planet to hold the greenhouse gases that we have been emitting is going down. It's based on deforestation, acidification of the oceans, loss of permafrost, loss of ice sheets. All of that is decreasing the planet's ability to sequester greenhouse gases. So what does that mean? The planet is warming, the yang is going up, the ability of the planet to sequester greenhouse gases and having a cooling effect is going down. What's that diagnosis in Chinese medicine? Yin deficient heat. The planet is warming as the planet's ability to cool itself is going down. So yin deficient heat is central to Wen being understanding, and heat and yin deficient heat is predominantly what we treat with lots of variations and nuances. It doesn't mean we treat everyone the same. We're always treating the person first. But heat and yin deficiency and heat and yin deficient heat is a predominant thing that I treat. And the planet is experiencing the same dynamic. The planet is warming as the ability of the planet to sequester greenhouse gases is going down. And not coincidentally, we have a yang excess overstimulated culture. We're too busy. We overvalue new over old. We overvalue expansion over contraction. We overvalue being busy over rest. It's the same dynamic. It's yang excess and yin deficiency. So we can see that individually, culturally, and ecologically.
What do you think that we could do ecologically to be able to balance that?
I am a proponent of root and branch diagnosis, right? So the the branch of climate change is the climate is warming as the ability of the climate to sequester greenhouse gases is going down. So the branch is yin deficient heat. But in the wisdom of Chinese medicine, let's talk about the roots. How did we get to the point where the planet is warming and the ability of the planet to cool itself down has gone down? That's based on how we see the world. Our beliefs about the world are creating the economic systems, the political systems, the educational systems, the medical systems that are creating this imbalance. So I think the branch is climate change, but the root of climate change is how we view the world. We are encouraged to value yang over yin. We're encouraged to value new over old. That's not an assumption in Chinese medicine, right? Some people will say, well, the Wen Bing, that's not even a medical tradition. That was only started in the 1300s, right? I've heard very senior practitioners say basically nothing good has happened in Chinese medicine since the Shan Han Lun, right? 1800 years ago, nothing good has happened. So, Chinese medicine historically really values the old. So it's orientated towards the yin. So in our culture, we're oriented towards the yang over the yin, new over old. We set up our culture and our economic system in general to value expansion over contraction. We're encouraged to believe that being loud and boisterous is better than being quiet. And we're encouraged to keep doing things rather than being content. So it's not only systemically, it's how many of us have oriented and valued our life. So we're oriented and valuing yang excess and yin deficiency. So there's lots of more concrete things we could talk about in terms of reducing greenhouse gases and planting lots of forests and sequestering greenhouse gases. That's all relevant for sure. But I think in the wisdom of Chinese medicine, root and branch diagnosis, it's essential that we talk about the root. Why? Because very few other people are, right? Chinese medicine is set up for this incredible wisdom. And so applying that wisdom culturally and ecologically is essential. So I think the underlying issue is to address the assumptions in our lives and our culture that have created the situation for climate change. And to summarize that, less yang and more yin. That's really what we need in our lives, in our culture, and then by extension, ecologically.
So what are some of the recommendations or homework that you give to your clients to help them at home start bringing in that yin?
Do less. Sit on the couch. Sleep in. Be content. Hang out with your family and your friends. Unplug from technology. Unplug from the internet. Unplug from social media. Do less. Really value the yin, so that we can talk about more specific diet stuff and things like that. But one is just to orient ourselves, orient our individual lives, and to talk to the patients that we work with about the value of yin. So from a Wenbing perspective, part of the remedy for a lot of the illnesses that we have individually, and then the ecological issue we have, is to do less. Sit on the couch, sleep in, do less, be less active. But activity is good for us, right? Exercise is good for us, right? Yes, it is good for us. But if we already have excess yang, more activity is not the antidote. It's less. So, and in terms of other specific things, warming food is not good. Coffee, I think, is uniquely inflammatory, is uniquely hot. I have a whole chapter in my book I wrote about coffee and an historical discussion of coffee. From a Wenbing perspective, spicy food is not good. Obviously, from a Shen Han Lun perspective, ginger is good, cinnamon, nutmeg, turmeric, etc. But again, the Shen Han Lun is assuming disease is coming from cold.
Right.
I'm assuming that disease is coming from heat. And so, and the Wenbing tradition is as well. So what can work for one view doesn't necessarily work for another view. So less spicy food, coffee, I think, honestly, is uniquely pathological. I don't think that there's very much good that can really come out of coffee. But even more generally, just to value doing less, to be more satisfied, to be more content, hang out, sleep more, sit on the couch more, unplug from social media, and just take it easy. And that alone, in our overstimulated culture, overstimulated country, can really be transformational. Separate from diet and acupuncture and herbs and all that, I'm just encouraging people to do less and be more content.
That's definitely hard. It's definitely hard with the society that we live in.
Yes.
I can speak for myself, and working for myself. I don't work for anyone else. I don't work for another clinic.
Yeah.
So there's definitely that constant underlying sensation of having to do more in order to live and be successful and to be able to connect with people that would require my services. So yeah, it is hard. Yeah.
I totally understand that. I've been self-employed my whole adult life for 25 years. I haven't worked for anyone. No one writes us a paycheck. I understand the reality of that for sure. And it's bigger than that though, right? It's bigger than our own individual clinics or our need as small business people to make money, which is fine and appropriate and good. But at some point, more is not better than less. Right. And I think as Chinese medical practitioners, I think it's really important, essential to practice what we preach, right? We have to embody the medicine. So if we understand that the culture is overstimulated and by extension, the climate is overstimulated, part of what we can resonate for our patients or our communities, our families is yin, right? To become the medicine. It's not just needles and acupuncture and food and all that, is to embody the yin. And I think that that is very effective in terms of successful business and successful practice. And we can become the medicine that our patients need. We can become the medicine that our culture needs. But our culture does not encourage yin, right? Our culture encourages yang excess. So I think part of that remedy, part of that medicine is to embody enough yin internally and to have faith that that will work. And to be rooted in the yin enough to realize that the yin creates the yang. Right? The yang doesn't create the yin. The yang is the manifestation, the expression of the yin. The yin is where the yin-yang circle starts, at least in my reading of Chinese medicine and my understanding. So in terms of where the yin-yang circle starts, it starts in the yin. So to try to experience and embody the yin as a way to understand that personally and then speak about that and resonate that to the people who come in to see us.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you for saying that. Thank you for sharing that, because I think it's easy sometimes to forget, like you said, we're in such a yang, heat, overstimulated society. And again, working for yourself, it's just constantly there, and we forget our teachings, and we forget that there's so much power and wisdom in our teachings, and something so basic as yin and yang. And just going back to that is going to help us as individuals, but also as practitioners.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, and the
before
basis
we,
of all, as I see, the basis of yin.
sorry, just your voice faded away, so I wasn't sure.
I was just saying the importance of yin.
Yes. And you referenced your book. What's the name of your book?
The name of the book is called The Yin and Yang of Climate Crisis.
Okay.
And then the subheading is Healing Personal, Cultural, and Ecological Imbalance with Chinese Medicine.
And where can we buy it? On Amazon, or where do you have it?
Amazon, Red Wing Books. The publisher is North Atlantic Books, so you can get it from their website. I think many of us, I think, value the convenience of Amazon, but I don't think Amazon is a very culturally sustainable or ecologically sustainable business. So if you can find it somewhere else, that's fine with me. It is available on Amazon. Red Wing Books sells it. I think some Chinese medicine herb distributors sell it too, but it's available in lots of different places where books are sold.
And tell me the name again of the book.
The Yin and Yang of Climate Crisis.
Okay, wonderful. So for everyone viewing our video today, definitely go check out the book, purchase it. I'm definitely going to get my hands on it. And I so appreciate you sharing these few moments with me and sharing with us your wisdom. I am looking forward to seeing you at the FSOMA conference, and how you just in this couple of minutes talked about heat and blending it with climate change in our day-to-day life and also our medicine is just so inspiring. So I'm very excited to finally meet you in person at the FSOMA conference and definitely get to listen to your lecture.
My pleasure. My pleasure to talk about it, and I look forward to seeing everyone at the conference.
Wonderful. Do you have one tip or advice you want to leave our viewers with for today?
Yeah, treat excess heat and yin deficiency. It works really, really well.
Perfect.
We'll talk about that in more detail.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Brendan, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye.